Our divine codes, our God codes, right, are way more powerful than that. What I'm talking about is on the back end of what's going on in the physical realms, the pre-matter spiritual concepts, ideas that are happening on the back end are controlling what's happening in matter. The pre-matter spiritual is the back end of the bigger picture of why I believe you're starting your podcast. Let's start to look at different perspectives so we can actually look on the back end of what's going on.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Game of Life podcast. I am your host, Dexter Walker. I am a 10-year finance professional, most of those years as a financial advisor, where I built a book of business from $0 to roughly $70 million. I've recently stepped away from that career in order to have this conversation with you. So as we dive into this conversation, I have a few questions for you before we start the journey. Is it possible that life is a game? And if it is a game, isn't it likely that we're supposed to be playing this game with the consciousness or awareness of who we are? And for those of you that love to think critically, let me ask you, what is the point in creation if you're not going to experience your creation? In other words, if you put your heart and soul into creating something, wouldn't you plan to experience that? All these questions lead to my greatest question for you. Is it possible that we are the creator, simply having a human experience? So in this show, we're going to interview guests that have built amazing careers. We're going to interview guests that have lived unique and interesting lives. Yet you'll notice they all have something in common. They've made it back full circle into remembering who they are, which is a divine soul playing the game of life. Welcome and enjoy.
Life's a journey, God in disguise. Perhaps we walk out with man's uprise. In this podcast realm, we're diving deep, unraveling the threads that the universe keeps. In the life, we explore, unfold dreams, empower minds, ignite those inner beams. Voices rise, tales of courage and strife. Welcome to the journey, the game of life, game of life. We explore, unfold dreams, empower minds, ignite those inner beams. Voices rise, tales of courage and strife. Welcome to the journey, the game of life. Life's a journey.
All right, family, welcome in. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the Perspectives of the Game of Life show. This is episode 1, and I'm really excited for our first guest, Mr. Seth Stewart. And before we dive into Seth, family, just remember this show, we're going to spend a lot of time giving you various perspectives from all of the people in this lifetime that have simply remembered who they are. They've lived a lifetime where they've gone out and explored and made a name for themselves and made the journey back home of remembering who they are, and they're ready to share their story. It's very important that we give these people our time, energy, and respect, because there's a lot of life knowledge and learning that we can have and really enjoy. So with that being said, Seth, we thank you for coming first and foremost. And
Absolutely.
if you don't mind, just a quick minute, just a quick high level overview of who you are, and then we'll kind of dive in from there.
Okay. Well, my name is Seth Stewart. I run True Kings Academy, and I have another healing business that is not male specific, not divine masculine specific, called Open Arms Healing. I've been known for being an entertainer. I grew up in the Midwest. Played sports, did all that stuff, trained to be in the entertainment industry, and lived in New York the majority of my life. Now I'm bouncing between the East and West Coasts, and still working and building up these programs.
Nice. And that is super interesting, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things. Now, some of you may notice I'm wearing the True King shirt that he mentioned. I actually wanted to take a quick side note because Seth actually runs a men's program called True Kings, and it's very powerful. It really speaks to that energy, very specifically of the divine masculine, which is something that I think we can all agree we've been missing to some degree. And so this is something that I wanted to support. I am a participant, but Seth is the owner and the person that runs it. And so I wanted to give a special shout out because that was a very powerful program to take part in. So thank you so much for that, Seth.
Appreciate it.
All right. So now we just talked about how you made it to starting your own business to True Kings and all these kind of things, but I want to start with the childhood factor because that's where a lot of us, when we take on this journey, a lot of us don't realize, but the childhood plays a massive part into reconnecting to all that you are. Okay, so for you, and you brought up playing sports, so did I. For you, were you always spiritual even in childhood? Would you say that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I know there was a few times in early childhood. I remember being in the crib and seeing, um, seeing things moving and trying to intimidate me, but I didn't know what intimidation was. I just kind of
Hmm.
knew it was trying to be some boogeyman energy. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I guess spiritually, the biggest thing that I tapped into as my childhood, but I wasn't connecting it as spirituality, was creativity. I had an enormous amount of creativity, an enormous amount of energy that back then, has equated to what would be ADHD. But really, it was, I remember doing certain things and kind of my body not being big enough, and I couldn't explain it.
Mm.
And I just had an exorbitant amount of energy, which I still kind of do a little bit to today. It's luckily age has kind of calmed it down. But there was a few moments, but again, I wasn't connecting it the way that we're connecting it as adults. Um, I just connected it as I want to do what I want to do in school. I don't want to be told what to learn. I don't want to, necessarily follow the rules because a lot of it wasn't adding up. It didn't make sense since I was a kid.
Right.
I also, my world was very much so, mm, see both sides to the story because I come from a mixed race home. My father's black,
Mm.
my mother is white, and so I got to see two worlds. So I had to be a chameleon from the beginning. I had to take the observer standpoint as a young child, which I think benefited me now, um, into the healing business, into helping other people, and just looking at the world. Is I come from I believe one of the reasons I chose my parents was to have that dichotomy and was to see both sides to the story. Um, but yeah, I mean, other than that, I just grew up wanting to ride bikes and hit people on the football field as hard as I could, and
Hmm.
just kind of with my friends. But I still was very much a focused kid.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I find super interesting already, and that is um, the perspective, right? This perspectives of the game of life, and we're talking about this. And one of the things that I've learned most importantly is that truth, things that are true or false, um, really ultimately depend on the perspective or the point of view that you're looking at. And a lot of times we think of things as, oh, well, that's either black or white, or oh, that's either true or false. And oftentimes, even when something you thought you knew was true, you can change your perspective or your point of view, and that may alter whether or not you believe that's now true, right?
I could
Even if
agree.
you were standing on it, right? Now, I find your story, even more interesting. You talk about coming from a mixed home, and being able to see both sides of things because naturally you're immersed with being in the black culture and the white culture, two different cultures, but they certainly do come together to some degree in some aspect. Um, I'm gonna piggyback on that, but from a slightly different perspective. Both of my parents are black. However, or what we know is black. We'll dive into the different types of things, maybe even later in this interview. But while both of my parents were black, I grew up in the black culture, but then also going to predominantly white schools. So I also had to learn how to look at different perspectives and look at both sides of things.
Hmm.
Very important because when you can see both sides, I would argue, and you probably agree, I'd love to hear your take on this. I would argue it makes you actually more well rounded and more prepared for so much more of the reality of life.
Hmm. I agree. I
So,
mean,
so
I would say that I would say that being in the middle, I've noticed a lot of people code switch, right? Or which is not the same as being a chameleon.
I
You
agree
can
with
be a
that.
chameleon to change your environment, but you're not going to change who you are. People that code switch are not comfortable with who they are to match the environment. A chameleon will just like match the environment, and so that goes into so many other deeper things that actually really goes into survival.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because whether you're doing chameleon work or whether you are code switching, it's actually people's need of acceptance and actually survival to fit in. Um, and but going back to this whole idea of perspective is what it taught me as a childhood, and I'm assuming it was the beginning for you. It was the beginning of being the observer, number one, and like you're saying, not being so steadfast and grounded into what you think truth is. And I actually call that like the diamond perspective. Like
Okay.
as a collective, we're a diamond, we're cut from different facets. And the more you turn that diamond to kind of look from a different facet, you'll
Mm-hmm.
realize that from your view and their view, somewhere in the middle, there is that. But then you have light and you have refraction, which points it to one way and points the light differently the other way. So it's like, what's really true?
Right.
It's all different perspectives on the same diamond, and I really think that that would be a huge spiritual tool for people to have,
Mm-hmm.
is being able to turn the diamond and look at it from a different way as an observer. Because of the biggest thing I've learned is if you can just become a witness within yourself, you will find your stillness and be in a non-judgmental way, and then you will apply that in the larger world.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. And for the audience, I'm sure most of you got it, but for those that may be struggling to put that all together, the diamond perspective that Seth just gave is very powerful because you can equate that to simply life in this reality. Um, you know, from our perspective here in America, we may have a certain opinion on a topic, whereas let's just say halfway across the world in New Zealand, they may have a different perspective, right? Still the same planet, still the same lifetime, still a lot of the same conversations. And so, I really want us to understand, this topic and this subject is true not only in different perspectives in terms of different countries, but simply also different age groups, right? We can talk about the same topics, but just somebody that is 20 may have a different perspective on the same thing than somebody that's 40. And that's just,
Hmm.
and that doesn't make one right or the other right, because a lot of times you're going from the angle that you can see or the awareness or consciousness that you have at that moment. And awareness and consciousness is something I definitely want to talk about and spend some time on. So we are going to get there. But thank you so much for that, Seth. Now,
Absolutely. Give me 1 second, Dexter. I'm so sorry to cut it. I just got to turn this off real quick.
go
Sorry.
ahead. And family, I'm actually going to keep this running because I want you to
Yeah, keep
see
it running.
that real quality conversation. We're not trying to be perfect here. We're trying to just simply have a conversation and give you all quality perspectives that you cannot get on mainstream media. You're not going to hear about this on Fox or MSN or CNN. You're just not going to. But these are great things, and I want you to see sometimes where we may slip up and misspeak as far as pronouncing something, or if he has to step away. I want you to see those things because we are all growing, and this is not about being perfect. It's not even about always being right, but it is about giving you unique perspectives so you can learn and grow and be the best of who you are.
Hmm.
Welcome back, Seth.
Thank you.
So now we talked about where you spiritual growing up. You know what I think is interesting? Given, because we're going to get to where you are now and how you made your journey full circle back to source. But what did you want to be growing up?
Um, I wanted to dance with recording artists. Like I wanted to be like Michael Jackson and MC Hammer, and dance with them. And you know, I almost went on tour with Michael actually. Um,
What?
so yeah, so I actually, by the time I was 15, 16, I actually started to take dance seriously because you know what it is. We just used to dance like
Yeah.
to music, the fam at family reunions. So people were like, "When did you start dancing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? When did I start dancing? Like, dancing is a part of my culture. Like, we just everybody dances, or somebody singing in the kitchen, or something, right?"
Something.
So, um, but when I was 16, I actually saw Alvin Ailey because I was actually, you know, uh, kind of acting up a little bit in high school. I saw Alvin Ailey perform, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I want to do." So I focused my junior through senior year to be able to get accepted into their program, and I started to go to college to be um, uh, to want to get into the Alvin Ailey company one day. Year and a half in, because I mean, when I first saw it at like 15, 16, it made me cry. Like it was like I'm a predominantly black dance company, but predominantly people of color because there was Asian folks, there was Latino folks up in that, and I had never seen that before. Um, and so I wanted to do that company. Lo and behold, at once I finally moved to New York because we got family in New York too. Once I finally moved to New York, um, and I did it, I was like, dang, I kind of really want to, just like pop off and like be on stage with like a recording artist. Like this is cool, but it's too restraint. And um, so yeah, so I started dancing for a recording artist. I went on tour by the time I was 20 years old. And that changed my perspective because I was flying on private jets, and then I go to some place to like Portugal. We'd be staying in like a 5-star hotel, and me being an explorer, I'd go explore Portugal, and like a mile down the road, I see like shanty towns. You know what I mean? Or like the metal huts or the metal,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
for miles, and I
Hmm.
would just like walk outside the neighborhood and be like, what a juxtaposition to see filthy rich and completely poor. And because I got to travel the world on that first tour at 20, it showed me so much more about what the world is really going through and how lucky we are here. And differences in spirituality and culture. I would pick up books wherever I went.
Mm.
um and that really started to, I think, you know sometimes we this the spirituality part may not be the forefront in our minds when we're going
Hmm.
through life, but life
Hmm.
itself, experience itself, spirituality is kind of like the mirror to reflect back those experiences. When I was seeing like how filthy rich and then how suffering, it was the beginning phases for me to understand that this whole life, this whole world, these different realms are all just variations of a larger spectrum.
Right.
And because seeing filthy rich and then seeing suffering has bothered me my entire life. And it's gotten better as I've gotten older, but trying to understand suffering from a spiritual or just human perspective
Hmm. Hmm.
has been very hard to surrender to.
You know what and thank you for that because and that's very powerful. You've given several perspectives that I honestly did not expect already in this conversation. One of the things that you just hit on is that a lot of times we're living life and spirituality is not on our forefront. I would actually argue, people may disagree, but I would actually argue, I grew up in a Christian church and even friends, family members, etc., elders in the church, I would argue that when I see them living everyday life, they're not necessarily leading right with that spirituality or religion. They're experiencing life, and then right, it can go back to that
It's a
forefront. But
reflection. Mhm.
exactly, um, I would also say, much more importantly, that from my perspective, spirituality really encompasses life. So um, when we think about just simply the food that we eat, right, there's something spiritual about that. A lot of people would say that's true, and then they pray over their food, right? I think that what I don't want people, because especially on the first episode, I don't want people to think that when we say spirituality, it's all about religion or to thinking about a higher deity. It's not all about those things. It's really encompassing the full reality of life is the way that I look at that. And there's so much that goes into it, so much. And so I just wanted to spell that out because I think that's important because you may hear me say spirituality or spiritual things, and then I dive into a topic you were not expecting me to go into. And that's because I do believe that there's so much around this, and spirituality kind of gets misconstrued with people not looking at it from the lens of this impacts every realm of our life. So I just wanted to spell that out. Now, um,
That makes sense to me. I
thank you.
mean,
Go
it's
ahead.
all when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about the whole tree.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's different religions or different spiritual practices or ideas, those are all roots of the same tree. That's what we're
Right.
talking about. We're talking
Right.
about, you know, the entire tree that is still connected as everything being connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about, you kind of hit on this a little bit. My next natural question for you is the major moments of life growing up, and you kind of hit on that a little bit, especially when you talked about how when you first jumped out into the world, and you went, I believe it was Portugal, and you're seeing shanty towns, right, and the high level living, right. So you're seeing the wealth and that juxtaposition of poor, right.
Hmm.
Um, I imagine that impacted you very well, and you spoke to that a little bit. Would you say it was that moment or a different moment? Which moment was it that made you decide, I need to find myself, or I need to dive deeper into my spiritual roots versus going on tour with a Michael Jackson? Because that's exciting. I think a lot of us had those kind of dreams and aspirations, but then at
Hmm.
some point there was that diversion, right, where you had to you had a moment and you said, okay, this is great and I'm still happy to teach and to dance and do these things, but I got to dive deep into my spirituality. What was that moment?
It was actually before I kind of, I need to rewind a little bit, but I've
Okay.
kind of always been connected because with that juxtaposition, my mother was Jewish but non-practicing. My father, I believe, was, my grandfather went to a Baptist church or I think a Methodist church actually, but again, non-practicing. So even growing up, there was these two religions that were not non-practicing, but the material that would be in the house. You know what I mean? The Bibles would be in the house, and that would be in the house. At 16, I went to a Christian church um, with my girlfriend for 2 years, and I knew then that I was connected, right? I just needed, I just wanted a different perspective of Christianity to kind of attach to.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew at 16. At 18, there was these were like the top two. At 18, I was living in New York, and I would go to Harlem almost every day and buy DVDs from this guy named Ra. And Ra had the David Icke DVDs, dubs. He had anything that you're getting on the internet now, he had back then on DVD. So I
Right.
would save up money and go buy a $10 or $20 DVD from Ra, and he was a percenter, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Nations of the
Mm-hmm.
Gods and Earths. And I would just get all this stuff and I would just like load myself up for like a year and a half. I would also start meditating. So I was reading a lot of Osho. Come to find out, Osho had this weird cult. We didn't realize till now, but the work, the actual. technology of the meditation that was created has been around forever, but it worked. So I was actually astral traveling out of my body by the time I was 18 and doing it consistently. And so here I was getting what was happening on earth and in higher realms and in government and all this stuff, from this cat in Harlem, and going down the rabbit hole hard and meditating. And then, by 20, almost 2 years later, then I'm on tour, and then I'm like, don't get it twisted. Like, I was in the streets, like, all over the world. Like, I was in the streets. I was on tour. We had the key to every city, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, I was
Yeah.
moving.
That's what's
But
up.
but deep down behind me, I was still like, let me go to this random bookstore. Let me go check out this. That's where it was a needle and thread. You know what I'm saying? But people and so I was wilding. I was young and in my 20s. And at the same time, I knew I had this connection, and there wasn't anything meant to do, because I was having fun. I was like on tour. I was following my heart. So I wasn't looking for anything more.
This is an amazing. I can't help but be excited, Seth. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is an amazing story and journey that I think I'm gonna love doing all these interviews because first off, I bet you were in the streets. Let's just start there.
Yeah, like,
You're
if
18, 20
like,
years old.
we're just talking
Yeah.
about perspective, we gotta keep it real. You know what I mean? Like, I can't
Yeah.
I I'm not gonna curse, but I was no fucking saint. Period.
But
You know what I'm
but that
saying?
but part of the journey is appreciating all that you are, right? The full package. Yep. Yep. You got to keep it
And
real.
and I needed to live that, 20s to 30s. I needed to live that for what it was. Because I'd be lying to the audience to be like, "Oh, I just kind of knew that." No,
Yeah. You
I
didn't. Yeah.
knew I had a connection, but in front facing during that time, I was wilding, and I'm glad that I did, because I don't feel like I missed out on something.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's thank you for that. Let's I want to make sure I don't miss it because I feel like this is a very powerful moment for those that are new to this whole perspective. You mentioned that you very specifically said that technology of astral traveling, the technology of your body, really is what I think you're getting at. And um, before I ask the question, audience, you may have heard me make posts about this on Facebook or TikTok, Instagram, any of these different social media platforms, where I spoke to how the body is technology. Now, throughout this conversation and many others, you're going to hear that's going to be a theme that you hear because we are all starting to wake up and realize that the body is much more technologically advanced than what we've been led to believe. Whether or not that's intentional or not, right? Because some people want to say conspiracy theories and all. Doesn't matter the intent. Doesn't matter if it was intentionally not told to you or accidentally. The reality, though, is it's much more technologically advanced than we've been told or provided for. Now, um, there's many different ways in which I mean that. One of the ways, though, I'm going to let Seth talk to is the ability to astral travel, and he talked about being able to see different things, and experience different things. So, Seth, two questions for you on that. When you were talking about the body being technology, what do you mean by that? How would you describe that for the average person?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I'll tie this into where we've led up to. So, the more you ask questions, the more answers will reveal themselves if you ask the right questions, right? And the reason
Mm-hmm.
that we're all here is because we're curious, and that means that we're all seekers, right?
Right.
So, being a seeker heavily since 16, 18, or whatever, I always ask the question, why? Why do black folks and white folks not get along? Why don't people like the Chinese? Ain't nobody do, why are we being taught these things in school? Why? That's the beginning
Right.
of your seeking journey. Now you're here and watching this podcast, right? Cool. So when you ask why, you don't like things at face value. So that means you have to go on the back end of what you're being told at face value. When you start to go on the back end of in your body or in your heart or in your mind, you will actually begin to notice that if you repeat chants or you repeat mantras, or if you just pray consistently, that things begin to change, right? The face value begins to change within your body, within how you feel, right? So that means you're inputting something into yourself, right? So we're saying technology not from an artificial standpoint, but from the organic standpoint. We are a system of systems, right? We have a central nervous system, the blood system, like you name it, the lymphatic system. We're a system of systems that if you change by using prayer or thought or ideas, if you take those programs and you put them into specific systems, the operating system will run different. That is technology. Okay. So what is technology? Technology is thought forms, whether they're dark or or they're light, they're positive thoughts, ideas, and that are repeated become programs, right? So you have the imprint of the idea. I'm a terrible person. That's an imprint. It comes somewhere in your life. Then if you repeat it, it becomes a program. Then if you keep running that program within your system, that is the technology. To whereas the antidote to that, right? The back to put in the back end is I love myself imprint. So we got to run that imprint enough times for it to become a program to override other programs that were placed into our systems. So the easiest way to explain it from that example is imprints are thoughts and ideas and other experiences that become programs. And this is known by governments and religious cults, mystery schools, that if you run that program enough, it becomes a technology. It can be broadcasted. It can be going individual systems, collective systems. And here we're talking about, spiritual technology, the beginnings of spiritual technology. So the reason that you're here is because you asked the questions why, you're seekers, and you have started to see what is going on the back end. And yes, we can change things on the back end from going either side.
So now, audience, if you've been paying attention, we got to come back full circle with the topic that was at the very beginning about truth. What is truth? When you were younger, you may have said things like, when you failed a test or whatever, I'm an idiot. Or some of you, I'm an effing idiot, right? So I remember growing up and having different friends and being harshly critical on themselves, right? And notice how Seth mentioned with that technology, you have to tell yourself on the back end, I love myself. And you have to repeatedly do that. You may have heard of that as affirmations, but you never knew why that was powerful or why that was important. You always thought it was just like this random thing that nobody could quantify or measure. It's not real. Oh, it's very real, right? You have to take time to understand your technology so you can master it. But we weren't programmed to do so. We were programmed to regurgitate what was given to us, which is two different things. And so I hope as the audience, you may have to run that back, how he just described the body and technology and consciousness, and really let that sink in and think through your lives about how that impacted you. What have you done during those times where you could have reacted different and shifted your whole reality or perspective? I'll give you all a quick example. And Seth, I don't know if you've ever done this exercise. It was super cool that I did. I literally did this. I got 3 different glasses of water and gave 3 different affirmations for literally 2 weeks, right? One was, I love myself, or I love you. Sorry, I was speaking into the water. I love you every day, extreme love. Another glass of water, extreme hatred. I don't even like using that word anymore, but it just very vile, mean things. And then that third glass of water, nothing. At the end of that experiment, if you want to call it that, The water that had the love every day stayed beautiful, stayed immaculate, looked like water you would actually drink and have no problem. If I just gave it to you today and didn't tell you it's been sitting out for 2 weeks, you would have drank it and be like, thanks, man, this looks pretty good. If I gave you the water that I'd been very vile and mean to, you would have been disgusted and said, I'm probably never coming to your house again because that's the kind of water and systems that you got going over there, right? And then the par, as you would expect, just was, man, it was starting to show signs of being older, but it wasn't disgusting looking like the vile water, right? And I think that's important because it goes to what you're talking to as far as the body being technology and things like that. It also, if your mind is open enough, helps you understand how the body can reprogram itself when you put that love energy into it because it's made mostly of water anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's a very important thing. And so the last thing I'll say on that before giving it back to you is I want people to hear that and don't just believe what I'm saying or Seth is saying. These are experiments that you can do yourself. Now, the one thing I'll tell you before we move on is your intent has to be there. So if you go into it with, I don't believe this is possible, then it just simply won't be. And that's in anything that you do. I don't care if you go start a business. If you don't believe in it and actually act like you and operate as in you believe it's going to be successful, it just simply won't be. That is just the reality of the life we live, right? Um, so, Seth, before we move on, I just didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add on to that. But man, so good.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, we'll keep it rocking.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
Mhm.
Um, was there a moment? So we talked about how you grew up, right? And we talked about the upbringing and how you were kind of going through this journey between 18 and 20, and then you at the same time you went and traveled the world living your dream, right? What was the moment where you got back to source consciousness? And I'm looking at this through a lens of you were born, so you came from source. You grew up, had your childhood experiences, learned about the different perspectives of life and life in the and had your dreams and went and literally lived them. But somehow you made it back full circle. What was that moment where you were like, I remember who I am?
Hmm. For me, like, okay, so it's more, you're talking about like the awakening, right? The
Yeah.
awakening one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it was the slow over the years awakening where some people are
Okay.
like, boom, I woke up and I remembered everything. That's I don't know how common that is. People talk about it, but look, your awakening, you have to like you still have to get there. It's a journey, right? But so I would say I kind of always knew,
Okay.
truthfully.
Yeah.
I went and worked at a primitive skills school. Actually, before I went, I was training at a primitive skills school because um, I realized I didn't know how to the earth, right? And at the end of one of my first classes, it was a week-long class in woods. We did a sweat lodge, and that was the first time I heard the earth. Like we were in a sweat lodge, I heard the earth speak, and she actually started to wake me up because I knew I could hear her voice. I knew I wasn't tripping. That was awakening of what was going on the earth here. So it was like this like foundational awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just say from mm, 2000 since 2012, there's there's been there's just been different things. There's just been many different things. It wasn't one for me. It was a domino effect over the past 12 to 14 years. So being in that sweat lodge and hearing Earth Mother was huge. I've been to Peru. I've done all the ayahuasca journeys in Peru with the shamans. I've done them here in the States. Um, I've done different types of ceremonies. For me, it was an accumulation. But that real, like, oh shit, like I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It took time to fully accept too.
I could not agree with
Because it
that
was
more.
before a lot of this stuff was on the internet or on social. It was on the internet, but it wasn't on social media the way it was now. So there
Right.
wasn't a lot of 14 years ago, there wasn't as much confirmation that you could get from others. There's
Right.
few limited sources.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I would say one of the hardest things about the journey is accepting once you realize who you are, right? Is
Hmm.
because the natural tendency of us is to want to go get that validation from others. But this is a
Or
conversation in the
confirmation.
realm. What'd you say?
Yeah, or not even just validation, but even just confirmation. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Right. But this is a conversation in a realm that ultimately has absolutely nothing to do with other people. And
Hmm.
when you're talking about accepting who you are, no one can tell you who you are. No one can confirm that for you. In my opinion and in my experience, when you talk about true acceptance, it comes from you and comes from within.
Hmm.
um, I like that question, and I thank you for sharing because I think that's intimate. Personally, that's an intimate topic as far as when you remembered who you are and what happened. Um, there's a lot that goes on in it. I will tell you, for me, the way it was certainly gradual and took time, but there was a distinct moment where I remembered, and I'll be honest, I laughed, right, really, really hard because I remembered it's a big game, right? This whole lifetime, that life in general is a big game, um,
Hmm.
and I really, really want people to make it to that point because I strongly and firmly believe that we would all operate differently once we connect to that source of energy again. Once we realize who we are, you would not be. I think earlier in this episode you talked about intimidation. You would not be intimidated, scared, fearful. You would not be that. We saw a lot of fear during the election time. That was just several weeks ago. There's a lot of things that we would do and would not do differently, just simply by knowing who we were. So I think that's very important. And thank you for sharing the intimate side of your journey.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that I think we need to define, what is the definition for you of the divine feminine and the divine masculine? How would you describe that to the audience or anyone that they walked up to you on the streets and asked that question?
Divinity, period, is connection with source. It's no longer letting the they used to call it propaganda, and now they call it whatever. Is no longer letting outsized things affect your consciousness, because this is all about, it's proof that data is the biggest commodity on Earth, but energy is the biggest commodity throughout the galaxies.
You better
So
tell it.
energy has always been the biggest commodity, right? And so, how do you explain divine masculine or divine feminine? Because they're connected to their divinity. So they're operating from their hearts, right? Or they're at least operating as best as they can, because they know that compassion and non-judgment and love is the natural way of being. So they also, a divine masculine or divine feminine, also live beyond themselves. They live beyond themselves. They're not as selfish as most people. They're usually, it's just connection with source. It's really that
Mhm.
simple. They're connected to their true organic selves.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. And um, I'm going to have you focus and us focus in this conversation on a divine masculine. And when I have a divine feminine aspect, I will dive deeper on the divine feminine as well.
Hmm.
And I think this is going to be really good. So for us on the divine masculine side of things, I want to share like a quick, this is us being vulnerable, but not vulnerable to a point of struggle. Just letting you know that this is a real conversation, and we're not everything's perfect or rosy. So, for me, in my journey, bringing my body online, opening chakras, etc., what I had to do as far as tapping into my divine masculine is learn how to feel. And I think that is something that a lot of us, as far as men, struggle with, how feeling, because growing up, we're told oftentimes, shake it off or ignore it, push through it. And so you kind of suffocate your feelings in order to accomplish different things. And while, to be honest, you maybe have been rewarded. I grew up playing basketball and I was rewarded for ignoring pain and ignoring feelings, etc. And it worked. It also worked for me to get to where I was in my financial advising career successfully, ignoring that I was tired and stressed out and all these kind of things. However, in this conversation, those things can't be ignored. You can't fake the funk. You can't fake your way through feeling and knowing and being all that you are. You have to, that's a big part of it, is feeling in this conversation. And so I brought up the divine masculine because I think a lot of us are going to, when we go down this journey in this path, that is going to be one of our pain points, is learning how to feel. You're going to learn that a lot of emotions and things that you thought were no longer there have always stayed inside of you. You just mentioned how energy is the most prominent commodity in the cosmos. So that energy of pain or struggle or whatever never dissipated. It's still in your body. And at some point, we're all going to have to face that. So let me ask you, would there be any advice that you would be willing to give to the divine masculines or those looking to grow into their divine masculine essence? What advice would you give those people on that?
Don't do it by yourself. Start to find community, whether it's our group or any other group, because the divine masculine is rising. I'm seeing a lot of other men's group rise up. So the resources are there. The lone wolf mentality is not serving us anymore, right? And it's just factual that both men and women, we all operate better in community. So especially as you get older, especially as you either get older or you go more down your spiritual path in life, that there's more isolation. So the number one thing is, don't go lone wolf. You're not supposed to do it alone. You're supposed to get advice from elders, people that have lived life before. That's always how we've learned. No matter what the culture was, any native indigenous culture always got advice from the elders because they lived it before. So the number one thing for the divine masculine and or for the divine feminine, go to eldership, go to the OGs, right? And kind of look at their life and see if if that's something that you want to leave. But getting yourself in the community, getting yourself in that new environment first will allow you to begin to it's kind of the same way in business. You will become the environment that you place yourself in, right? So if you want to be a business person, you go to those people. If you want a more spiritual life and to come into understanding what's happening, you put yourself around those people because they're vibrating information, and it's the one-off things that they say that you get a gemstone. So get your gems from the elders.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is that you have to really look at your life choices from your past and reconcile with them. And pray that God is leading you, right? Whatever you believe God is for you is leading you on your journey. That is the beginning and end. It's connecting with source and then operating from the throne in your heart. So you're not necessarily, it's not about you anymore sometimes. So you do have to feel, you do have to look at the traumas that you've had, and you have to be honest with them. And you still have to be a man. You still got to take care of shit, period. You still have to speak up when people need to sit down, right? So we have to begin to understand our power, be led by God, speak up because we are the protectors on this planet.
Yeah. So before this interview, those listening, the audience may not be familiar with a true self or higher self. We'll dive into that later, but let's just summarize it in that higher that God spark that's within you. You're gonna learn, like when you pray to God, for example, you are communicating with yourself and having those conversations, um, and tapping into a higher level of knowledge and of consciousness. That being said,
I'm ready to go in, Dexter. Whenever you're ready to go in, I'm just ready to go in.
yeah.
Can
So
I
that
go?
being
Should we
said,
just go in? Let's go in.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So that being said, my higher self came in and very specifically talked about how for the divine masculine, what you all need to hear is that you need to feel, and so that way you can control your emotions and not let them control you. So what did you just say, right? You just talked about how you still have to be a man at the end of the day. However, the gap that I'm identifying here is that many of us think that because you've suppressed different emotions throughout your life, that you now control that. You don't control that. You're just running from it. Those are two
It's
different
never been
things.
healed.
And
It's
it's
never been
never been
healed.
healed. And that's important for you to really hear, audience, and have a real conversation with yourself. Are you running from those emotions, or are you able to control them? Have you mastered them? And that's very important because energy does not lie. You're going to learn that there are people walking around that their gifts is reading energy. And even though you've ran from different moments in your life and different pain points, etc., that doesn't mean that they don't exist and you can't hide from it. However, what you can do as we shift in our consciousness and the energy on the planet is changing, what you can do is control, tap back into your feelings, feel all of that energy so that way you've mastered it and you can't be manipulated. You can't be controlled. A quick side note, just 3 weeks ago, we had the election. And what did we hear for the last 6 months? A lot of fear based things to control you. I'll give you the one that just popped on at the top of my head was this is, by the way, I didn't even vote because I wanted to intentionally sit out and observe. This is that perspective things we were talking about. And I observed a lot. One of the things I observed was right before the election, Oprah Winfrey came on national television and told you all if Donald Trump wins, you'll never have a vote again in the future for the presidency. There is no way around that was a fear-based conversation, and I bet a good percentage of you voted for one individual over another because of that fear that was injected into you. However, when you've mastered your emotions, that wouldn't even phase you. Because what are you even fearful of? You have no reason to be fearful. This whole game you're playing and a very big part of, should you choose to. But go ahead, Seth. I can tell that there's maybe something that you were wanting to say.
We've been in a spiritual war on this planet for a very long time, period. Okay.
Tell
So
them.
what's happening right now on Earth is the reawakening to our true selves because we've been out of our own systems because of those things and because of this manipulation that's happening. Both sides of the light spectrum, both the angelic side and the demonic side, understand about magic. They understand about prayer. They understand about rituals. They understand that these programs run into systems that can be broadcast to the world. They've been doing it in physical wars since World War I, World War II, you name it, right? But let's go even further back, like from all of this. All of us come from one source, right? And God's source, before the division of masculine and feminine, wanted to experience itself and create, right? So we are further emanations of God's source, right? But what happened is we got so far from that God source, right? Like there was this God source that became masculine and feminine and it became a trinity, right? There were actually geometric sounds and shapes and colors that created all of this, right? And so where we are on this planet right now is one of the further emanations because we're in more dense physical bodies, right? So when we're talking about reconnecting ourselves, we're talking about reconnecting that thread or that line all the way back to the original God source, right? And everything that's happening down here right now has always been a battle over basically organic timelines and inverted timelines, right? Organic timelines are connected to source, which means that you can almost eat anything on the ground. It's like very much like Eden. We don't war with each other. Like, y'all are over there, cool, we're over here. You want some mangoes? Great. We got some, we got some whatever we got, we got this. That the Garden of Eden did exist, but it existed on higher realms. And why? Because the light is a spectrum. The other side wanted to experience itself, so it was always raging. Our brothers and sisters on the dark side were raging with the light side, right? And this has been happening for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years. There's been different experiments of humans on this planet, right? There's so much diversity. There's so much biodiversity on this planet. Now think about how much biodiversity there is in the cosmos, right? But all of this is a grand experiment for God's source to experience itself. You're just a little G God experiencing your God self in this lifetime. The reason we are waking up is so that we are not manipulated, because there are other technologies running. Some of those technologies are actual computer AI technologies, but some of it is just ritual. There's been so much ritual abuse on this planet that has taken us away and has overridden this planet. So, what has actually happened is an override of organic Eden, beautiful ways of living and structures where we knew who we were, where we were able to travel the cosmos and be cosmic citizens. We were always able to go to other planets. We were always able to go to inner Earth and other realms. That's a part of who we are as galactic citizens. Well, an overlay came of inorganic, inverted, false matrix structures over a long period of time. Those are the spiritual wars. That's why they took down Lemuria and Atlantis and ancient Egypt. This net came over the planet. Now what we're doing is we're getting back to our connection to source to remove the inversions within ourselves and within the planet in order to break off that net and live back in the Eden, true self, organic, original timelines. So we are breaking off and removing the casting of spells that have been within us, so that, like Dexter said, we are now no longer manipulated by the technology that they're using with propaganda and fear. Is literally something that infants can do, or kids that can talk. Like, the technology that's being used against humanity is actually like kindergarten, first grade technology, and it's really sad how well it's working, because our divine codes, our God codes, right, are way more powerful than that. What I'm talking about is on the back end of what's going on in the physical realms. The pre-matter spiritual concepts, ideas that are happening on the back end are controlling what's happening in matter. The pre-matter spiritual is the back end of the bigger picture of why I believe you're starting your podcast. Let's start to look at different perspectives so we can actually look on the back end of what's going on. And what I'm telling your audience is that what they have been using against us to the general public is kindergarten, first grade level. Now, what they're doing to the planet at stargates and things like that is super advanced technology. But basically, to make it very long story short, they've been harvesting human energy for a very long time. They can capture that. They can take it off planet and use it. It's very much like Monsters Incorporated. And it's time to get your life together and find the God within you, so that you're no longer manipulated and your consciousness is not being caught, captured, stored, sent off planet to these other dark forces that are still your brothers and sisters on a light spectrum, so that you can actually be consciously free.
Man, that was beautifully said. And I really I pause there because this is a moment that in this episode, if this is new to you, you need to pause and breathe. You need to pause and let that sink in. You may even have to replay it a couple times. We know it was deep. we know that there was a lot of energy that was presented during that. It maybe even made you feel some type of way. But it was very important. It was huge for your consciousness. What is your consciousness? Your awareness, your ability to perceive the different aspects of your reality that are going on around you. When he talked about the idea that this is first grade, second grade level manipulation, frankly, that's going on, it really is. Remember that water experiment I just talked about earlier in this episode. That's a grade school level thing. You should have done that in kindergarten to see that you can manipulate the elements around you. There's no excuse for why you have not done that before. The excuse is they don't want you to know how your thoughts interact with your reality. You literally manipulate your entire realm around you. Should you believe it and commit to it and actually tap into that spiritual side of you, that God spark of energy inside of you. I hope
And
you
I'll
really
keep it
take
real
that into
simple.
heart. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead. But it's everything that you're saying. We're basically returning home to our hearts. And if you return home to your heart, you can easily return home to God's source. And that can be through religion. I don't care. That can be through Buddhism. That can be through whatever mysticism. There is no right or wrong way. But the only way to operate the correct technology that is connected to this planet, because the planet has already upgraded, right? Earth Mother's already upgraded back to her Gaian self. So as these inverted technologies are falling off, or those things that were connected to them, right? Those inorganic things were connected to them, as they start to pop off, kind of like the Matrix, the best thing is to do is to stay in the heart, to begin to understand your connection, and just pray and just ask.
Right.
Prayer is a program, and you can use different prayers for different programs. That's why they've existed. That's why there are different religions, for it to hit those cultures. But ultimately, the beautiful thing is that we're returning home, and as people are flipping out, what's happening is the falling off of the inversions, because
Absolutely.
Father
You're
God
starting to
and Mother God are not playing anymore.
No, and you're starting to see that manifest in the reality. You're starting to see the veil lifting. You're starting to literally see the different types of beings that have been walking around, masquerading as humans this entire time. For those that listen to this and think, well, that goes against what I believe or what I know to be true, I want to talk, for example, to those that are religious. Right now, what we're talking about is Christ consciousness.
He had
So,
full connection.
we're not. So we're not. I'm not coming at you if you're Christian or Catholic, saying that Jesus is bad or doesn't exist. I'm not even going down that road. What I'm telling you right now is, if you're religious, you should recognize that Christ consciousness. Take time to sit with that. If you are somebody that works on logic in science, because I've had that conversation with people, we're talking about quantum physics. It'd probably be good for you to actually do some research in that regard. Quantum physics. How does that impact your reality? What are different terms that you've never heard before?
And can I tie
We
that
can go
together
about
there,
this
Dexter?
any type of way. We can go about this the religion way. We can go about this the mathematical and science way. No matter how you want to chop it and size it, what we're talking about is high level information to help you rise into all that you are. Doesn't matter how you want to go about it. If you want to try to get real technical, we'll go there too, or I'll go there too for this channel. But you'll get the point. The last thing I want to say on this is, for those that are struggling with the concept that there are other beings and other life. You talked about biodiversity, Seth, earlier, and being on different planets, etc. For those that are struggling with that concept, just look around the planet that you exist on and ask yourself, do you truly believe in your soul, in your gut, that it is possible or likely, let's say, because yeah, it's possible, but is it likely that we have all of these different beings and animals and plants that all interact with each other in an ecosystem where it's self-sustaining for billions of years, and there's no other planets that exist that support things like that? Highly unlikely, if you're logical at all, to believe that that's true. And I'll add another nugget. They're just now starting to acknowledge to you through your Congress, feel free to look it up, that there's other beings around us. They're just now starting to tell you the truth about that. They've been lying, which means they've been lying to you for hundreds of years, because they said they've been known it. They just didn't want to tell you. They'll say national defense and all that, but if I got to spell that part out for you, I'm sorry, but that doesn't even make a lot of sense. National, we're talking about a global consequence if there's different beings coming down here, flying around, and etc. I believe they just acknowledged that there's different beings in the oceans. We'll move on from that. I just want you to understand that we are living in a time where you're going to be faced with this information and you're going to have to make a choice. Now, you can sit there and be ignorant if you want to. We're going to be fine. Seth's going to be okay with it. I'm going to be okay with it. That's your choice. But we want to make sure you know you have a choice. If the house was on fire, you'd hope that we'd knock on the door, right, and let you know it's on fire. Now, if you choose to stay in the bed, that's on you. That's okay. We're not here to stop you, right? But this is information that you need to know. Whether or not you want to, I've had, Seth, I don't know if you've gotten this before, but I've had some people talk to me about how, oh, well, I don't want to interact with the spiritual world because that's demonic, right? And I can understand that. But at the same time, if you've listened to this episode, what we're trying to get you to see is the spiritual world's happening around you, regardless of whether you want to interact or not. This is happening. These world wars
Period.
have happened, right? These things,
Yeah.
things have happened. It doesn't matter whether you want to. It is. Because you are, we are, I am, he is. It doesn't matter whether you want to. It's going to happen, and we're trying to give you the keys so you can see fully and be present and make the best decision for yourself. So I'm sorry I got on a soapbox or a tangent on that, Seth. It looked like you
I
wanted to
don't
say
think it
something.
makes sense to me. It's all and what we were saying is that it's all connected to the same. All paths are still going to lead to the truth. The paths are just a different perspective. That's what you and I are saying, and that's what Christ consciousness also actually is that non-judgment, is that compassion, is that empathy, to let people be where they are on their spiritual journey, right? Because I had somebody tell me the path doesn't move, the people on it do, right?
Mm,
So we're not here to prove anything wrong. We're not here to prove anything right. We're just saying this physical realm is, the veils are dropping to the other spiritual realm outside of it and then through it. And as these veils drop, the best thing that you can do is still your mind so that you can feel your heart, and use prayer and use these technologies of chants, affirmations to stay connected to source so that you can be grounded and calm as things further reveal themselves. That means that as the lies fall, and that means as the truth for you and us as a collective begins to come in, because this light is going to come in faster. And just like a newborn baby, it's hard to see when you're adjusting your eyes to the light. So no matter what religion, no matter what belief in spirituality, all paths are going to lead to the ultimate truth, which is why neither of us have to prove anything. We're just suggesting, as your spiritual brothers and as a spiritual community, it's time to continue to stay on your path and to look deeper from a non-judgmental, compassionate perspective, because the time is now for this shift.
absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Seth, because we got on a pretty heavy heater moment there, but it was good quality information and feedback for the collective. What is one thing, or maybe a couple things if you want to, it's up to you. What is one thing that you wish you knew earlier in life? And take your time. If you want, I can actually go because I have something that I think is very interesting that I wish I knew earlier.
One thing I wish I knew earlier, I mean, that it's all just a dream. It's an experience, and that nothing's really like, I mean, it's a wild ass dream.
Yeah.
Let's not get it twisted. This shit is wild down here and up there and all over there is no up down. It's a everything. But
Hmm.
I wish I knew that earlier so I didn't take things so seriously.
Yeah.
Answer.
That's real, and that's one of the first things. You talked about how it's a journey coming into your awakening to who you are. It's one of the first things that my spirit guides, some people guardian angels, right? If you want to call them that, one of the first things my spirit guides kind of share with me is you're taking this too seriously. You're taking it too, because I was getting emotional about it. I'm like, wait, we've been lied to, and they've been lied about who we are. I'm diving into the research back based on like the Native Americans and who were really here and who what, like just the whole thing, right? And I'm getting riled up about it, but I was getting so riled up, which is good sometimes because it's passion, right? But if it's controlling you, then that's a different conversation. That's not good, right? So it's interesting that you say that, and I do like that. I like that as one thing we could pass off. So it's all just a dream. For me, I wish one thing I knew earlier in life. I wish I knew that our money supply in the United States is not actually government owned. So I spent 10 years in the financial industry, in the finance industry. I was a financial advisor most of the time, made it all the way up to assistant vice president, built a book from basically nothing to about $70 million portfolio. I spent a lot of time in that arena. And it amazed me after all those years of experience, whether it was in college, whether it was in mastery courses like FINRA or SEC, if you ever heard of that, you have to take these different mastery tests to prove that you're a quality advisor, et cetera, that you had the aptitude. All these years of experience directly in the game. And it wasn't until I dove deeper into my spiritual journey that I started to uncover a lot of things that did not make sense. And one of those things was just the simple concept that the United States does not own or control its own money supply. And I bring that up because while we're talking about the spiritual conversation, like you said, it all goes in together. It is all looped into the same conversation. And energy, money is basically just energy. A lot of us have this misconception of what money is. Money is none other than energy. And it's an energy exchange. When we buy goods and services, we exchange our energy for something else, right? And I'm wanting to talk about this because so many of us walk around in life hamstrung about money, and we make our life decisions based around money, but not quality. See, when you know that money is energy, right? You look at it differently. If I told you that money is just simply energy, I think that most of us would look at it differently and operate differently with what we do and don't do, how we do and don't think, what we do and don't pay for, right? Um, and so I just wish I knew that sooner because, audience, I'm here to tell you that if you think that getting the bag is going to be your savior or where you want to go, that's your end all be all, you are going to lose that game every time. You need to be finding your purpose, which is going to give you natural energy, which is going to then bring in the financial abundance that you need. And also you are able to control your reality much more effectively. Does that make sense, Seth? Because I know I just kind of
It
went there.
does, because that's a huge point, which is that if we're talking about the game and perspective, right, which is the epitome of this podcast, which is why I'm really excited about it, right? If we're talking about change of perspective in order to be able to play the game. it's not, if money is an energy, it's not meant to be captured. You're not meant to get it and hold it. You're meant to gain more energy, more money, because the system's inverted regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take some time to get out of this inverted system, but the system is messed up
Mm-hmm.
on so many levels.
Right.
But what you can do, the cheat code that you can do, is not to get the bag and then there's just this like plateau of everything's fine. The idea is to use what energy you need to get or capture money, to then reuse that energy of money to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cheat code, because now I'm able to do other things because I've had to change my perspective on money to where I'm not using my own energy as hard to get the money. I'm now using what I've captured and figuring out a way to invest or do whatever that it can do more work for me so I can do more passion stuff. Because
Absolutely.
it's not a real system. It's not a true system.
Right.
It's a made up system that we still
Exactly.
have to play in. So that's why I'm going to tell people, like, don't get it twisted on your spiritual journey. You might still have to keep your job while the night times you study, or the weekends you study. Like, I Dexter, I told all the guys, like, you don't
Yep.
necessarily have to quit your day job, but it might come at some point where you don't want to have to do what you have to do. But there is still an energy that you need to hold on to financially while you're learning the game.
Yes. And
But
I
it is
think
not an end all be all. That's
yeah,
it. That's
yeah.
it.
And I think that takes me to the next point then. Um, as I had these different interviews and as I immerse you all into these new topics, into the different ways of thinking and open you up to this full game that's being played, understand that there's a balance that must take place on this journey. You are going to literally deconstruct a lot of the programming that you've had ingrained in you, which can make your stability feel rocky because you're
Yeah, you're gonna
literally
lose your shit.
what do you say?
You're gonna lose your shit. Let's just
Yeah,
say it. You're
yeah,
gonna lose your
yeah,
shit.
yeah. I mean, but you don't need to. Again, if you take heed to what I'm saying, because there is a balance. Meaning, you like you mentioned earlier, you may want to keep that day job, right? You may want to take things slowly, and to be honest, you may have to unplug from the world for a little bit so you can do what it is you need to do internally. The point is, there is that balance, though. You still, even though we're talking about a cosmic conversation, you still have to be grounded with the reality that you are in a physical vessel in this lifetime. So you got to play the you want to see the full game so you know what's going on in your consciousness and awareness is up here, but you also need to be able to be balanced in that you live here in this lifetime in your physical vessel, that you still got to balance and take care of with your obligations, family, etc. So there is a balance. It's not easy, but that's okay. That's why I'm here. That's why Seth's here. That's why the elders are here that we talked about earlier that you need to talk to. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't need to do that. But what you do need to do is understand that there's more going on and that you're going to have to allocate your time and energy a little differently and recalibrate that. That's what we're telling you. All right. So, what advice says for the audience member? We have two different audience members that I want to give advice, and we're wrapping up. The first audience member is someone who's just starting to explore who they are.
Hmm.
This is a brand new conversation. What is one piece of advice that you would give that person, or a couple, if that's what comes to mind?
Um, that um, that light is a spectrum, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you choose what spectrum of the light you want to be on, but it doesn't mean that the other can't exist, right? And it's the same thing about perspective. Perspective is a very good tool. Awareness is an even better tool, because awareness allows you to have perspective. So having awareness to have a larger perspective and be non-judgmental are probably 1, 2, and 3. Have awareness, allow your perspective to be different, and be non-judgmental to whatever it is that you're learning. Let it be information, because it goes so much deeper, and you don't need to overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, agreed. Completely. So then now let's take it a step further. This is the person that's recently accepted who they are. Let's say that they've gotten to the point where they're comfortable saying, okay, I'm back to source conscious now, I'm connected,
Mm-hmm.
but now I got to figure out my purpose. Where do I fit in this whole game? Because we all do have qualities and strengths and things where we fit into the puzzle to add value. What would you say to that
Yeah.
person as far as one piece of advice?
I would also say slow down, because your mind's still, when you're trying to figure it out, your mind is still gonna be interrupting your heart. And it's going to be felt, right? Like what you're going to be doing is going to be felt within you. And you're going to have to take time. So make it very simple. Like in finding your medicine, you can kind of figure out, like, there are architects, there are spiritual architects that understand the back end of things. They understand grid work. There are healers. There are speakers that are activators, But a lot of times people can just stay where they are, being regular teachers or being firefighters or whatever it is, and they can let the fire spread from there of truth. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody is meant to be up on a platform doing everything. That's not the
Yep.
objective. The objective is to affect your community, light up these little candles, and then the whole thing will be lit up. So those that have kind of been in it, you can relax. Like, I still work outside of these courses. I still have another job that is a lot more tactile, because I know that I need it. I can't be up in
Mm-hmm.
these realms all day. It's too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's okay to have a balance if you've been doing it. It's okay to be where you are. You may not even be saying anything, but you can be emanating love, right? And it's the same thing. Like, I learned a lot about Yeshua. Like, he said we can do everything and more, right? And even when they touched his robe, they were changed, right? We can clearly do that. If we can emanate that, then that means that anybody who presses by us, because there is such a thing as spiritual and energetic residue, it can be dark and nasty, or it can be filled with light. You could be the janitor and be filled with light, and for some reason that school or that office building has changed. Now what you're actually doing is creating a pillar of light, which is what
Mm-hmm.
our bigger objective is. The
Mm.
reason that we're coming into such consciousness and awareness, and this is what I'll say for people that have been on the journey, is because the elders have already been doing it for us. So
Yep.
we need to show respect to the elders and our ancestors. So we can begin to ask God from our hearts, where am I needed? Not what you want to do, where am I needed? Because
Mm.
what I'm good at and what I wanted to do, Dexter, is not actually where I'm needed. Where I'm needed is this whole other thing that I remember doing from past lives, but it's a lot harder and it's a lot more annoying.
Yeah.
And I have to go to some darker places that I don't want to go to, but that's the need. So when your audience members who have been on it, your vision might change over a 5 or 10 year period. Then your need, your gifts might need something else for the bigger collective.
Yep.
But you don't have to be some spiritual teacher or educator. You can do it being a janitor or being a stay-at-home mom, as long as you are lit up with your light body. That's what Yeshua, Muhammad, Buddha all taught. Light up your light body and be where you are.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you can be, I don't want you to listen to this as an audience member and think, you like he's saying, you don't have to be somebody on the floor. You could be a comedian and operating in your light body and operating in love in your heart and still have an amazing impact on the collective, right? Simply just by producing authenticity and laughter is it can be enough if that's who you are, right? So when you're going to hear a lot of times on this channel, who are you? For me, and I'm not going to answer that question for you. I don't know who you are. I know who I am. I want you to know that nobody can tell you who you are but yourself. Go within and you'll have the answers. Thanks so much, Seth. This has been a great podcast, a great conversation. I may even have to have you back sometime down the road, to be honest, because I feel like there's so much that we can be diving into. Um, are you actively working on anything or promoting anything that the listeners can review?
Absolutely. So for the men, specifically True Kings Academy, we have the men's courses. We're doing another round of that January 22nd. I'm building up some survival courses because I lived and worked at a primitive skills school. So I'm going to be adding the general men's course for, emotional, financial, spiritual support in that course. And then the survival course I'll be adding. And then I'm finishing my book, which will be coming out next year. And from that, I will be doing Open Arms Academy, doing small courses and workshops, and then healing services for people. So whether that's house clearings, if you have entities or portals open in your house, if you have stuff on you, energetic residue, or just, spiritual things that are going on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it. I've had the benefit of working with other great speakers and healers as well. And I've kind of created my own small network of healers. So we have the men's stuff at True Kings Academy, healing services, consultation, and small workshops at Open Arms Healing. And in the middle of that, my book will be kind of piggybacking off of both.
Awesome. How can you be reached for those who are wanting to speak directly to you or reach out to you?
You can DM me at True Kings Academy on IG,
Yep.
or you can DM me on Open Arms Healing
Yeah.
At IG.
Perfect. Now, for the audience, I want to end every episode kind of in a similar fashion. First, I want to summarize who you have been listening to today, because remember, the whole point of this podcast, we start out from source and we get born into this lifetime and we live this experience and ultimately make our way back to source. For Mr. Seth Stewart, grew up in a mixed family, got to see various aspects of life, experienced Broadway shows, experienced traveling in the world through his dancing abilities and all these kind of things, and still made himself figured out how to get back home to source. You got myself, Dexter Walker. I was a financial advisor for about 8 to 9 years, in the finance industry for 10 years. Built a portfolio up from $70 million, from nothing to $70 million. Owned a house by 25. You're talking and listening to quality individuals that have really gone out here and made something of ourselves, and then also made that journey back home. And this is who you're listening to. So that way, when you're wondering why you're listening to this perspective or these perspectives, because I'm going to have many of these, I want you to get a full, well-rounded view of life, because that's the information we should be sharing and talking about and working through, but we don't get that. Seth, let me ask you this question. Who are you?
I'm Seth Stewart, and I'm an eternal being in the human flesh for a limited time only.
That's beautiful. And I am Dexter Walker. I am. And that's it. I am. Hope that makes sense, family. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Seth, really appreciate you joining. I know we're going to go on and do big things here, and really grow this networking community to all that it deserves to be. So thank you so much. Peace, family. We love you. We'll see you next time.
Peace. Blessings.
Step into the light where the dreams unfold. Yeah. Voices from the past. Yeah. Whisper in the bowl. Listen up. Echoes of the soul. Searching for the truth. Come on. Feel the beats alive. We're living proof. Let's go. This to the journey. We stronger. Together stronger.